Hey, it's Joe at Reds. I'm going to give you some rowing lessons today for personal watercraft. I'm out here in front of the shop and I'm using one of our rental boats. This is a WaterMaster Grizzly. It's the slightly smaller version, a little bit scaled down from the Kodiak that I often row. I'm just going to give you some basic pointers. This isn't going to make you an expert or certainly teach you everything you need to know, but I think it'll be extremely helpful. I've got my boat here. The oars are strapped in for transport. I just carried the boat here from the shop. The whole thing weighs about 35 pounds or something like that. I've got a pump that's already attached to it, and I've got my life jacket strapped to the back there. Hopefully I don't need it. So let's go ahead and get in the water. The easiest place to launch a personal watercraft is always going to be in shallow water where I can stand. We don't use anchors on these boats, because the way I'm going to anchor it is simply by me standing in the boat and letting the boat rotate down like that. I can fish most of the time right here in the boat, just like that, standing here. If I need to ditch the boat on the shoreline, I'm just going to drag it up on the shoreline. It's really easy. I've said this before in other videos. One of the advantages of the WaterMaster is I never have to walk back upstream and get my boat. So if I fish and work my way down like this, I could work my way down 100 yards down a big piece of water and I don't have to hike back and get my anchored boat. So that is going to be my anchor system. When it comes to getting started, I'm going to rotate my boat back up and I'm going to unclip my oars. My oars have this really cool mechanism here that's really simple. And the way these work is they actually rotate in and out, and when I'm at rest, I can lock them in. I'm going to redo these straps. One thing is you kind of want to keep a tidy ship before you take off here. Okay, so I'm going to double check everything after I get my oars unstrapped, and I'm going to let my oars hang downstream in the current, and I'm going to rotate them up into the kind of the resting position, just like that right there. Get everything else locked in. And before I take off into the swifter water, I'm just going to double check that my footrest is in the right spot, that it's not so short that my knees are up here. My seat's in a comfortable position. It could probably stand to go up just a tiny bit, so I'm going to move my seat back up just a little bit, just like that, so I've got a little bit better support. But I'm pretty comfortable here. I'm going to check my oars and make sure that they can just be dropped in and out. When I'm at rest, I can set my oars up like this. When I'm actively rowing, I'll have a hold of my oars. So I'm just here in the shallow water. I feel pretty comfortable. I think I'd be ready to go out. But before I row out here and show you a couple of actual rowing tips, philosophically speaking, when we row a boat on moving water, we always want to make sure we're pulling, okay? We're always slowing the boat down, all right? We're never speeding the boat up by pushing. If it feels like you're doing a push-up, you're doing it wrong. We want to slow everything down. We want to take our time, and we want to make sure that we're pulling the oars, okay? And I'm rowing like this and slowing the boat down against the current. So that is the one thing you take away from this video. That should be it, is that the power stroke should be like a rowing machine and pulling, and never pushing like doing a push-up or bench rest, okay? Bad stuff happens when you do that, right? So I'm gonna get out in a little bit deeper water. The cameraman's gonna go down here in just a moment, and I'm just gonna kind of slowly navigate the boat towards you, show you a couple of things, and then stop the boat with my feet the way I normally do. One last note on that is I like to wear a pretty sturdy, I could certainly pull this off in flip-flops with my experience, but I like to wear a pretty sturdy felt bottom boot. So that way when I put the brakes on and I stand up in my boat like this, I have the best possible traction for letting that boat rotate around myself to a resting position downstream like that. I like to have pretty sturdy footwear. So let's row out here, show you a couple of tips. All right, so I'm ready to get started. One thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to slowly walk my boat out. I've got a hand on the seat to just keep my boat correctly oriented, just like this. And I'm out here in shin deep water. This boat will draft in shin deep water, no problem. I'm looking downstream and being absolutely careful that there's no major obstacles right below me. At that point, I can go ahead and sit in my boat like this, and I'm still at a stop. Make sure my oars are comfortable here, and then I can go ahead and take off. Now, in rowing this boat, I'm gonna constantly be slowing it down, just like this. And I'm constantly gonna be just kind of braking the current and keeping the boat going a little slower until I feel like I'm under absolute control, and then I can begin to relax and let the boat go with the current a little bit more. Now when it comes to anchoring, as I put my feet down like this, I'm gonna flop the oars in and lock them up so they don't become a distraction. And I'm gonna go ahead and help the boat rotate down like that. And now I'm anchored, I'm ready to fish if that's what I chose to do. Maybe I need to retie a knot, but I have the ability to just stop just like that right there. All right, when you're rowing one of these boats, angles is really important. Our goal is to keep the boat parallel with the current most of the time. We don't want to let this boat float sideways like this right here. Broadside in the current, this boat's going to become very hard to control. In fact, it's picking up a lot of force just right here in the shallows already, much more so than when it was parallel the other way. So I don't want to be broadside because there's so much force on this boat right here. In fact, it's kind of a pain to just sit there with it broadside in the current versus like this is super easy. So we don't want the boat to be broadside. We want to get about a 45-degree angle if we're going to navigate, say, towards the other shoreline. So I'm going to show you that right now, and we're going to pretend that I'm heading out to the other shoreline. I'll go a little ways out in the river. I'm going to go out, and then I'm going to row back. And that's the same way I'm going to taxi across to the other side is the same way I'm going to avoid an obstacle as well. So as I get started, and I'm going to head towards the other shoreline, I'm going to get my oars ready. I'm going to go ahead and release my feet, and I'm going to keep my boat oriented at about a 30 to 45-degree angle this way. And I'm just going to back row just like that, never getting broadside all the way. I'm going to go ahead and head out like that. And now that I want to go back, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to point my nose to the opposite shoreline. And I'm going to come back in. Again, I'll lock my oars in. I'll help the boat rotate, anchor the boat just like that. That works great. So that's how I'm going to taxi back and forth when I want to cross a river. It's very similar when I'm going to avoid an obstacle. Let's go ahead and go down to this rock, and I'll show you how to avoid a rock with the same strategy. Okay, so I'm floating downstream, and oh my gosh, there's a big rock right here. I don't want to hit it because bad things happen when I hit rocks, okay? What I'm going to do is I approach the rock. I'm going to avoid it to the wide side, okay, the safe side where there's more water space. So as I float towards the rock, I'm going to keep my nose pointed at the rock, and I'm going to propel myself using backstrokes away from the rock. So here I go. So I'm floating downstream, and I see the rock coming, and I don't want to hit it, so I'm going to use my left oar with a little pull. I'm going to get this angle right here, and I'm going to taxi around it. Now, if I wanted to pull back in behind the rock, I'll simply point my nose the other way, and I can move back in. These boats are incredibly maneuverable, and you can row through an obstacle course quite effectively with pocket water just like this, simply by keeping your nose pointed towards the rock or the obstacle, taxiing away just enough to get around it. If you need to get back in and come in behind that obstacle, which is very common, you simply point your nose the other way. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate this one more time, and I'm just going to taxi out into the river, and I'm going to taxi back. When you first get a boat, ignore the fishing for a while. Figure out how to do simple things like row around rocks, cross the river, and anchor your boat on foot. You'll be better served for it in the long run when it comes to fishing. So I'm going to take off on kind of a journey here. I'm going to row quite a ways out. Cameraman can follow me down the shoreline. I'm simply going to go out and I'm going to row out, and I'm going to row back part way, and then I'm going to turn in a couple of circles using a scissor stroke like this. And I'm going to demonstrate that right here. And I think that's a really good exercise for people when they're first learning, to get comfortable going in a circle like that. That's fun. And then I'll just slow my boat down like this. Practice doing that. I'm in a very safe environment here. It's a great way to get comfortable. And you can spin pretty quick, but in the event this ever happens to you while you're on the water, and it will, you need to be able to deal with it and get comfortable getting that boat back in to the point position, which is what I call this. I just call this the point position. Just right here like this. Boat's pointed up and downstream, and you can go in a circle. So I'm going to go ahead and take off here. I'm going to taxi out with my boat at about a 40-degree angle. I'm heading out. And I've now anchored my boat back here on foot under great control. So those are some of the things that I'd say if you bought a WaterMaster, you're buying a WaterMaster, maybe you're gonna rent this WaterMaster in a very safe environment. Practice those things first, ignore the fishing, and make sure that you can taxi out into the river, spin around a couple times, quickly regain control, and get back into a safe place and anchor the boat. Don't do that stuff with obstacles below you, but make sure you get on kind of a bar similar to the one out here in front of Reds like I am today. Regarding the use of fins, we're going to do a completely different video when it comes to fins. I discourage people from using fins until they're pretty experienced on the oars. Fins have been known to get people in a little bit of trouble from time to time. They can be very effective and safe, but get used to using the oars and anchoring on foot first.